I think a lot of times where the old heads are not on point is because in this thing of ours, we have more great stories than we don't than we have bad stories. What I mean by that, when you think about this game, you can go back to the '60s and '70s. You can go Russell, you can go Magic, you can go Larry, Mike, Kobe, myself. And I was taught as a youngster that if people are going to pay to watch you perform, you put on a show. So I think a lot of times when we as old school players and old heads don't see these guys put on the show, and they're making a lot of money, and they're going to make it harder for you, I think, if they're not putting on a show, and we have to pay these prices and these streaming services. So I think we get on them so they know and understand. It's not that we're hating. It's like we want them to know and understand, like, bro, you're making $50 million, you deserve it, but that little kid that wants to see you play, don't be saying you're taking the night off when you're not really hurt. That little kid that wants to see you play, I know the three is open, but don't you think if you can just go baseline and dunk and just throw it down, it would just protect this thing of ours? So, a lot of people may think it's coming from hate, but for me, it's coming from love. I want you to put on a good show to protect this thing of ours. Guys like Charles only made 2 or 3 million. I was lucky. I came in '92, and like I always tell people, Commissioner, my dream was to make 8 million for 10 years. That was my whole dream. And then I got lucky, and I don't know what you and Mr. Stern did, but it went boom, it went crazy. And then I got another hit at 100, and I was like, but my whole process was, okay, you're paying me all this money, I got to put on a show. So I just want people to know and understand that it's not us just hating. It's like, hey, we don't think you put on a show tonight. We think you need to put on a show to protect this thing of ours. Now, when I say this thing of ours, you know exactly what I'm talking about, Commissioner, because you've done a great job of getting these kids a lot of money, and I commend you for that.
Well, thank you for saying that. Maybe I'm saying some of those things privately and not publicly, but I think, I've heard someone say before that the greatest form of caring is honesty. And I think there is that sense from, you and your crew, on Inside the NBA, that you're in the family. And that the things you're saying are coming from the heart. And so I love the show, and I appreciate the fact that you guys are willing to be direct. It doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has to agree all the time either.
Right.
But it's an honest point of view. And to your point about this generation of players, I think it is important that they hear from those who came before them, the greats of the game, and not just sacrifices they made, but how they approach the game, that there is an entertainment side to this, that ultimately all of us, are here because of the fans. I'm fortunate to be in this position because of the fans, all the current NBA players, and this whole huge ecosystem built around the NBA that, believe it or not, accounts for something like 50,000 jobs when you start including the people who work day of game in the arena and everything else. It all comes down to those 450 players, but them understanding that this is about something bigger than themselves. And that, yes, at the end of the day, it's about the competition, and it's about doing all they can to win. But there is an entertainment side to this. And part it's the realization that, and it goes to television ratings. One thing that's different from the old days, there's unlimited options right now. If you want to sit down and look at a screen, you could be playing a video game, you could be looking at YouTube, you can be looking at unlimited numbers of videos on social media. Yeah, and whatever. I think my cable system has 2,000 channels, and then you go to streaming, and multiple streaming services. So the competition is fierce, and I think, Adam, that goes back to your question about other leagues, or the NFL on holidays that we're on. It's like, I welcome the competition. I mean, we have to get better as well. I mean, and it's one thing. It's what I lose sleep over. That it's every day. People are making an election to pay their money to go to an NBA game, or literally every moment you're watching an NBA game, you're sitting there with the clicker deciding, is there something better else that's more engaging to watch? And part of the issue sometimes doesn't get enough focus. It's not just the number of people who watch the game, but how long they watch it. A rating is the average minute. So when people who used to watch a 2.5-hour game for on average an hour watch for 50 minutes instead of an hour, that's a significant decline in your rating, even though it's the same number of people who are engaged in your game.
Back in our day, Commissioner, there was only traditional media. Now there's traditional media versus social media. The game has always been global. you've helped make that a staple of our league. But social media fans seem to think that you are going to, in addition to the two teams you're adding, one day possibly have a team in Barcelona, have a team in Madrid, have a team in Russia. Is that a thought process to, really make it a global game, have NBA cities and cities in Europe all in the same schedule?
Yeah, well, so number one, as you well know, we're very much a global game now, of course. And, basketball is the number 2 sport in the world after soccer. I was over in France this past summer for the Olympics. At least it was my view that we were the hottest sport in Paris. We saw some of the best basketball played, some of the iconic games, against Serbia, against France in the gold medal game, and Shaq, I think these numbers are roughly right. When you joined the NBA and when I joined the NBA in 1992, I think roughly 5% of the players in the league were born outside the United States. We're now getting close to 30%. And as we've mentioned before, I mean, some of the names, I've said, it's whether Wembanyama or Antetokounmpo are, the very best players, Luka, I could go on, some of our very best players, Joker, et cetera, were born outside the United States. So it's truly global. Then the separate issue is, are we at a point where, outside of Canada, we could have additional teams outside the United States? I mean, you asked about Europe specifically, but, I'll mention that, Mexico City is a market that we've been playing regular season games and not just preseason games for a long time. I think that's potentially very doable. It's closer to get to Mexico City from New York than to get to LA. There's other issues involved. It's not about to happen overnight, but I think that's a real opportunity. In Europe, one of the things we're looking at right now, and in fact, we're playing over in Paris, the Indiana Pacers and the Spurs, bringing Victor home to Paris, are playing 2 games in late January there. And one of the things we've been discussing is whether, before we add NBA franchises in Europe, whether there's an opportunity to do some sort of independent league in Europe, taking advantage of the enormous interest in the game and these great European capitals like Paris and London and Berlin, Madrid, other major cities in Europe that love basketball. So that's something we're looking at. And then the issue, I mean, again, you've always been ahead of the curve, Shaq, as a technologist. Part of the issue here, I'll generally call it technology, and it goes to air travel. That when I was younger, there used to be supersonic flights from Kennedy to Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, and we no longer have those. I know I've read at least that there are other supersonic jets sort of that are in the process of coming to market. I think if air travel were faster between the United States and Europe, it would certainly make it a lot easier. I mean, the NFL, of course, is playing a fair amount of regular season games in Europe, but when you're playing once a week and you can have a bye week, it's much different. We're playing roughly 3.5 games a week. The impact of air travel, time zone changes, et cetera. It would be much more difficult for us. But I think, one day maybe it'll be my successor, but I could definitely see, a division of NBA teams in Europe, and I think it would be an incredible thing for the game.